this guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
This is a text exchange you had with Bill Graveland, and that's who?
Mr. Commissioner Jean-Simon Schoenholz for the Commission, and as you said, our next witness is Mr. Ian Freeman.
Do you swear that the evidence to be given by you to this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do. So, Mr. Freeman, you sat down with Commission Counsel, I believe last month for an interview. You recall that?
I do.
So let's pull up WTS 6021. We've prepared a summary of that interview, and you've had a chance to review it with your counsel.
I have.
Do you have any changes to make to the summary?
There is one change I'd like to make.
Okay.
It's towards the end. There's a reference to tow trucks that were supplied or coordinated to, I believe it says we supplied 10 to the city of Ottawa.
Okay.
Send 10 to the city.
We could scroll down to try and find that.
Yes, so it says here in this paragraph that's at the bottom of the page, Mr. Freeman's understanding is that MTO sourced some heavy tow trucks for Ottawa and up to 10 tow trucks for Windsor. It's actually 10 for Ottawa.
Wonderful, so we'll have that entered into evidence. So Mr. Freeman, could you start by telling us your current position?
Currently, I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Corporate Services Division at the Ministry of Transportation, which is also the Chief Administrative Officer.
And I understand that wasn't your position during the events of January and February earlier this year.
Yeah, that's correct. At the time, I was the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Policy and Planning Division at MTO.
Mr. Freeman, good afternoon. My name is Ajit Chaudhary. I'm with the CCF. I have some questions for you about tow trucks.
Okay.
And the legal tools to compel the provision of tow truck services. So I'd first asked the registrar to put up the emergency measures regulations under the Emergencies Act, and I have a document code for that, although I imagine it would be on speed dial here. So it's ssm.can.401911_REL.301. So while we're waiting for it to come up, I take it you're familiar with the emergency measures regulations?
I'm familiar, but by no means an expert.
Sure. You referred to them in an answer to a question posed by my friend from the commission, though.
Yeah.
So could we go to page 8, please? So if we could just scroll down, please, to, Mr. Registrar, to 7.1, that's good. So would you agree, if you could just have a look at section 7 sub 1. Have you seen that section before?
Yes.
Okay, so you'd agree that section 7 sub 1 in substance says that a person must make available and provide tow truck services if requested by the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness or the RCMP Commissioner or a designate. Correct?
Yes.
Good, okay. So could we go down then to the next page, please? To 10 sub 2. And so could you just have a look at that, please? Have you seen this provision before?
Yes.
Okay. So would you agree that in substance, section 10 sub 2 provides that creates a criminal offense for a failure to comply with the emergency measures regulations, including the provision we just looked at together, section 7 sub 1, in relation to tow trucks?
That's what it appears to do, yeah.
Good. And there's sanctions involving both fines and imprisonment under both summary and indictment.
Yes.
Good, all right. Now, I'd like to take you to the HTA. And while we're waiting for it to come up, Mr. Freeman, you stated in your evidence this morning, or earlier today, I should say, that the HTA is a key act. Is that, we're going to take you to section 171. So this is on page 361, please. If you could scroll down just a bit. Okay, so if we could stop there. So this section is entitled Tow Truck Services. Are you familiar with this section?
Not in great detail, but I can understand it.
Okay, so I'd like to ask you a question that's about section sub 3.1, which is on the next page. So let's stop there. So this says, the title for this subsection is Other Prohibited Activities, and it says no driver of a tow truck or other person who is in charge of a tow truck shall engage in an activity prohibited by regulation. Is that right?
That's what it says, yes.
Good. Okay, now let's go down a bit further to subsection 6. Stop there, please. And so subsection 6 says that the lieutenant governor in council or the provincial cabinet has the power under subsection B to prescribe prohibited activities for the purposes of subsection 3.1. Is that right?
Yes.
And that seems to be quite a broad grant of authority to the provincial cabinet, correct?
You're getting a little out of my depth in terms of legal interpretation here, whether it's broad or not.
But it says that it doesn't say what sorts of activities can be prescribed. It just says prescribed activities.
Prescribing prohibitive activities, yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So
for the purposes of what's above, but I just want to refrain from trying to interpret this too much here. It's beyond my expertise.
Okay, good. And then let's go up a little. I promise you, this is the last subsection we'll look at together. So if you could scroll up, please, Mr. Registrar, to subsection 4. And so this provision is entitled offense. It creates a provincial offense for breaching any provision in this section, which it would include, of course, any regulation enacted pursuant to subsection 3.1, correct?
Yes.
So, Mr. Freeman, I'd like to ask you this. Would you agree that under section 171, at any time, the Ontario Cabinet could have made it a regulation that a tow truck driver cannot deny a tow truck services if requested by a suitable public official, so a municipal chief of police, the OPP commissioner, or the head of the RCMP?
I don't know the answer to that. It's there could be other provisions here that suggest otherwise. I don't know this well enough.
So, Mr. Freeman, I'm going to press you on this a bit. I put it to you that this is the only section in the HTA governing tow trucks, and that under this section, the provincial cabinet can prescribe conduct by tow truck drivers, and that it's an offense if a tow truck driver breaches that requirement.
I'm not a lawyer, and anytime we would say what we can or can't do, it's something we would engage our counsel on. So I don't want to tie myself to an answer that I could be wrong for the commission.
Sure. So, Mr. Freeman, I'll conclude on this note then. If in fact the provincial cabinet could have passed a regulation requiring that a tow truck driver provide a service and making it an offense to not do so, would that not in substance have been the same as the corresponding provision in the emergency measures regulation?
I think based on what you said, possibly, yes.
Good, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brennan Miller, and I'm counsel for Freedom Corp, which is the organization that represents the protesters that were in Ottawa in February and January of 2022. Just have a couple of questions for you, sir. Are you familiar, I'm assuming you're familiar with most transportation law. I know my friend has put some things to you and that you talk to lawyers, but are you familiar with the International Bridges and Tunnels Act?
Not in any sort of depth.
Okay, but you're familiar of its existence?
Yes.
And that's a federal law?
That's my understanding.
Right. And I understand it that law is governed by the Federal Minister of Transportation. Is that correct?
That I don't know.
Okay. Are you aware that under that act, that at any time, for the purpose of safety and security, that the Federal Minister of Transport, if the minister Is of the opinion that there is an immediate threat to the security or safety of any international bridge or tunnel, the minister may make directions, including directions respecting the evacuation of a bridge or tunnel and the diversion of traffic or persons, requiring any person to do or refrain from doing anything that, in the opinion of the minister, is appropriate to do or refrain from doing in order to respond to that threat. So he's permitted to just pass an order to vacate the bridge, vacate the area. Would that have been helpful?
Well, so two things. First, without the act in front of me, I can't say that's part of it or not. I don't work for the federal government. And again, police were leading the response, so you would have to ask police whether or not that would have been helpful.
Mm-hmm. And this protest, did it started on the 7th?
No. It
7th of February?
Started, sorry, you're talking about in Windsor. I believe that's the date.
Right, and they cleared it on the 12th?
12th and 13th, I believe, yes.
Before the Emergencies Act?
Yes.
And at no time did the minister pass a regulation in order to vacate that bridge?
The federal minister?
Yeah.
Not to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I just have a couple of quick questions. Just in terms of the demerit system, you talked about the problem that the regulation of trucks and their CVROR is provincial.
Yes.
Is there no mechanism for transferring demerit points from one province to another if a vehicle from another province, a truck, incurs offenses of some sort?
No, there is. So my understanding is convictions that would happen in one jurisdiction are shared with the home jurisdiction and would go on their record there. What doesn't happen is the points that are accumulated on an Ontario carrier, there's no, sorry, I'm not doing a very good job explaining this. To really quickly to better answer the question, if there's a conviction that happens in Ontario, another jurisdiction would report that on their carrier's record.
So I'm trying to understand what the problem was because of trucks from outside of Ontario. You'd mentioned that was a problem, and I'm not understanding it.
Well, so if we took action specifically, we can only take action from a sanctioning action on Ontario carriers, meaning we can only suspend Ontario carriers' CVOR. We don't have the ability to remove or suspend the licensing of an out-of-province carrier. We can, if police lay charges and there's convictions in Ontario, that would go on their home record. But what that province does and how that impacts their license in that jurisdiction, Ontario has no control over. Does that help clarify?
It doesn't. I would expect the consequences are probably fairly similar from one province to another if there are an accumulation of offenses.
Absolutely. I would think that they would be somewhat similar from province to province, although I can't speak to what other provinces have. The suggestion was more in response to, at the time, there was a suggestion, well, why don't we just cancel or suspend their CVORs or equivalent in other provinces? And the point that was being made is Ontario doesn't have the power to suspend or cancel other provinces' abilities to operate.
I understand that, but I think I also understood you to say Ontario didn't have that power either without going through charges and et cetera. So
yeah. This is true. I don't know that we were trying to say anything other than that it's, we have control over the Ontario population of carriers. We do not have oversight of out of province carriers.
I guess I might not agree in the sense that you have the same oversight. You're supposed to supervise and charge them and make sure that they're behaving in the same way an Ontario carrier would.
Well, police would lay charges, or our enforcement officers for specific infractions, but the role of the registrar or the deputy registrar in sanctioning them only applies to Ontario carriers. Maybe that's a better way to describe it.
Okay, I understand that. Now, one of the things I wanted to also understand is the emergency regulation in Ontario. It provided powers with respect to the licenses, the CVROR. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Now, what's the process there? Is it a charge to which they will then have to go to court and they have a right to appeal? And
Specifically with the emergency order, there was no rights to appeal. It was a direct sanction that the registrar could apply.
so it's suspension immediate, which is the difference with a
That's right.
process of. And the emergency order, you said at one point that there was no provision with respect to tow trucks in Ontario's order.
Related, I think specifically, I think I was referring to direct that tow truck
Yes.
must comply or any sort of indemnification.
Yeah, so there was nothing in the emergency order in Ontario?
Correct.
And do you know if if your ministry had requested that be included?
I don't recall a request on that.
Do you know if anyone else requested, any other ministry or police requested?
I don't know.
Okay, those are my questions. Thanks very much for your testimony, and thank you for accommodating the commission by switching. That's much appreciated, so
Okay, thank you.
thank you.